So this is serious writing with a computer. I wanted to talk a little about how I get my writing done, see if this is useful for anyone else. I write novels and short stories and essays and a bunch of stuff that's lost between these categories, and I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to use a computer effectively for the writing and just connecting it to the whole writing process and the writing life. Really spent a lot of time trying to figure out how not to let the computer derail the writing process, which it's so easy for that to happen with all the options and features and tools and gimmicks that you can find on a computer. A few caveats before I go into this. This presentation is more of an overview of what I want to talk about. Maybe it's like a pre-presentation presentation, because I'd like to go far more in depth into all this stuff. But at the same time, I want to cover the basic things I've learned at a high level, mostly centered around not getting distracted while writing. I apologize in advance that this is fairly Mac-centric. I got a MacBook a few months ago and I've obsessively been digging around for the best tools to get my work done. But these concepts, especially in this presentation, will map to the Windows world or whatever operating system you're using. So here's a quick outline of this short presentation. I'm going to first talk about the tools that I don't use, then I'm going to talk about the tools that I use with particular focus on 4 specific tools, and then I'll bring it back around to the things that I learned that brought me to these tools in the first place. So I thought maybe I'd start off talking about the tools that I don't use. Microsoft Word. There are times when I've got to use Microsoft Word, like when someone says, I need a fucking Word document, then I give them a Word document. But I no longer use it during the creation of the writing, just because it's too big and clunky for my taste, and it overly mixes the creation of the writing with the presentation of the writing. I end up messing with formatting when I really should just be writing, not worried about how the page looks. I don't mean to act like nobody should be using Word. I'm sure there are a million novels way better than mine that were brilliantly written in Word. This is just maybe my own hang-up. This was a little surprising for me because even though I think I've finally come up with a very simple solution, when I started breaking it down, the list of tools looked a little bit scary. Now at first I'm just going to speed through this list, but don't worry, I'll drop in to a few of these tools and utilities in more detail shortly. So there's Scrivener. This is a fabulous piece of software for managing a bigger project like a novel or a lengthy or complex story. Write is a great tool for having just a distraction-free way to write. Notational Velocity is just great at managing a bunch of small bits of text or small stories. Then I use Text Wrangler when I'm doing some simple coding or scripting. I use Simple Note. That's a great little app on my iPhone. I shamefully admit that I do some writing on my phone. Text Expander. I barely can type any longer on a computer without Text Expander, which I'll talk about in a moment. I also use some kind of syntax called multi-markdown to write my text. I use something called LaTeX to convert my writing into a PDF document. I use Dropbox to get my stuff from one device to another. Freedom's a cool tool to keep your ass off the internet. I love Launchbar. I use it to launch apps and scripts and perform some other functions. Default Folder X is another cool tool that I use, and the list goes on. So it turns out that my simple alternative to Word sounds a lot worse than Word. But it's not as bad as it seems. A lot of these tools are more like utilities that operate in the background or to the side of what you're up to, and they just help make some of the repetitive or tedious tasks more seamless. For instance, if you take a tool like Text Expander, which works in the background when you're typing anything. You set it up with text snippets, which are abbreviations for things that you type over and over again. For instance, the titles for my 2 failed novels. I type those phrases a lot, and it gets tedious to type them, but now I can type them with just a few letters each. And Text Expander is a lot more powerful than just that. Like when I write short little scribblings each day, I have this convoluted way of naming each file, so I can track it related to the type of writing it is, the name of the project that I'm working on, and today's date. So that kind of sounds a little like a pain, except it's just a few letters with Text Expander. Every time I type something a lot, I'll add a snippet. This goes for regular English words and phrases as well as pieces of code or scripts or anything. Okay, so now I'll move on to some of the writing tools that I use. Notational Velocity is a free program that makes it easy to create many documents quickly. It particularly shines when you're writing or working on many small documents, and is great for searching all your documents for keywords or just zipping through them real quickly. I tend to start writing things in Notational Velocity. But then when I really want to focus on one particular document, I use a program called Lightroom. This program claims to offer distraction-free writing, and that's exactly what it does. Simple and clean. It really shines when you just bring it into a full screen mode, and it lets you just focus on the words you're writing and gets rid of everything else. The program costs $25, but there are many similar-minded programs that are free that do this kind of thing. I just happen to like this particular program the best. Okay, and now onto the most elaborate writing tool, Scrivener. There are times when I want some help organizing my bigger sorts of projects. In this case, for me, it's usually working on a novel when I'm trying to look at the big picture, moving sections around a lot, investigating it for point of view or plot or inconsistencies. So that's where Scrivener comes into play. I tend to start my writing in Notational Velocity. Then when I want to focus on it, I use Lightroom. And then when it gets bigger or becomes really a novel that needs to be managed, I go into Scrivener. I need a whole session to go into detail about what that's all about. But you can look at your project in many different ways. You can go full screen just like Lightroom. You can also look at it like a bunch of index cards on a corkboard. You can look at it as an outline. It's a pretty great tool, and I'll talk about it another time. So now I can get back to what I learned from this probably too obsessive but finally becoming more productive exploration of doing serious creative writing at the computer. Remove distractions. One way to remove distractions is not to mix the presentation with the creation. You can do this with dedicated tools that are just for the writing and don't distract you with what the final printout would look like. You don't really care about the page boundaries when you're working on a story. And to go further, you can use a program that offers some kind of full screen mode. Lightroom and Scrivener both do this. Plenty others do. Then again, you don't really have to change what tool you're already using today. Just maybe think about being as focused as possible on the words. You also might want to consider killing the internet for some period of time. There's a program called Freedom that lets you do this. Find a way to trick yourself into not using the internet. Number two is see if you can stop having to repeat repetitive tasks. So I've shown a little bit of how Text Expander can help with repetitive typing tasks. There are other places to cut corners. For instance, you can use a tool that holds more than one snippet in your clipboard when you copy and paste things, so that you can paste the past 50 things you've copied. There are many tools like this. I use Launchbar to do this, but there are many others. Also, when you start getting to the point where you're looking to send your manuscript out into the world, you may want some kind of template rather than repeatedly futzing with the formatting. Have a template that already has the proper formatting. Whatever you do, just think about what things you do over and over again, and then think about whether you can find a way to do it once, or Google to see if someone else has already solved the problem for you. The third thing is probably the most important thing I learned: to keep it as simple as you can stand it. Basically, I think you should dumb down the tools you use so that they do just what you need them to do. For instance, maybe it's not worth using Microsoft Word's docx format. Maybe you just want to use a simple little text file with Notepad or TextEdit or Notational Velocity or Write until your piece is ready for sharing with the world. And with regard to the tools you use, maybe you don't need such a fancy pants word processor. Maybe you just need a dumb little text editor. I found that if I used a super powerful tool, I wasted a bit of time trying to figure out its superpowers. So I tried to dumb it down until I was just looking at my own words and nothing more.